Kevin Costner. What happens when a man reaches the very top, loses almost everything, and still refuses to stop building? How many people could watch their career collapse, their marriage fall apart, and millions of dollars vanish, yet still stand up and start again? For decades, one name has lived inside that question: Kevin Costner. In a single year, Costner lost the biggest television role in America, tens of millions of dollars invested in his own project, and an 18-year marriage. But if you think that was the first time his world collapsed, you don't know his story. Hollywood once crowned him its golden hero. Later, the same industry mocked him as reckless and finished. And then, against all expectations, he returned as the most watched actor on American television at 65. But behind that dramatic rise and fall lies a deeper story. A story about risk, about stubborn belief, and about the price a person pays for chasing a vision when the entire world tells him he's wrong. So the real question is this: was Kevin Costner a reckless dreamer, or the rare kind of man willing to bet everything on the stories he believed in? To understand that, we have to start long before the Oscars, the box office hits, or the Hollywood headlines. We have to go back to a boy who never felt like he belonged anywhere. The boy who was always the new kid. Kevin Michael Costner was born in Linwood, California. His father worked as a utility worker for Southern California Edison. His mother raised 3 boys while the family moved from town to town: Compton, Delano, Visalia, Villa Park. Every few years brought another move, another school, and another room full of strangers. Have you ever walked into a place where everyone else already belonged? Where friendships were already formed, and you were just trying to figure out where you fit? That was Costner's childhood. Later in life, he would describe himself as the kid who was always new. And when you grow up that way, something interesting happens. You start observing people closely. You study a room before entering it. You learn how people behave, how they speak, how they react. Without realizing it, Costner was developing the instincts that would later define his acting career. But at the time, it wasn't preparation. It was loneliness. 2 things helped him escape that feeling: water and stories. He loved swimming and even competed seriously for a time. But storytelling pulled him deeper. He read constantly. He watched films. He even wrote poetry as a teenager, private words he never shared. At church, he sang in the choir. And somewhere inside those quiet performances, something began forming: a love of storytelling. Still, acting didn't seem like a realistic career. So when Costner enrolled at California State University, Fullerton, he chose a practical major: business administration. It was the safe path. But a question lingered in his mind. What if the safe path wasn't the right one? While studying business, he secretly took acting classes and participated in small theater productions. And the feeling never went away. By the time he graduated in 1978, he had made a decision that terrified him. He was going to pursue acting, not as a hobby, but as his life. His parents were supportive but cautious. His father understood how hard life could be. And Hollywood, that world offered no guarantees. But Costner had already made up his mind. The years nobody talks about. Costner married his college sweetheart, Cindy Silva, in 1978. Then reality arrived. There were no movie offers waiting. Instead, there were odd jobs. He drove trucks, worked construction, labored at a fish hatchery. Every day he chased auditions. Every day he heard no. Hollywood didn't see him as special. Casting directors labeled him fine, but not memorable. 4 years, nothing changed. Then something happened that would have ended many careers before they even began. In 1983, Costner landed a role in the film The Big Chill. It wasn't huge, but it mattered. He worked hard preparing for it. Then the movie came out, and his entire performance had been cut. The only thing audiences saw was a brief shot of his body being dressed for burial. Imagine that moment. Years of struggle, and the opportunity you fought for disappears in the editing room. Most people would have taken that as a sign. Costner didn't. Instead, the film's director, feeling guilty, gave him another chance. That second chance came in a western called Silverado. And for the first time, Hollywood noticed him. The meteoric rise. After Silverado, things changed quickly. In 1987, Costner starred in The Untouchables alongside Sean Connery and Robert De Niro. Instead of being overshadowed, he held his own. Then came Bull Durham. The film wasn't just a baseball movie. It was warm, funny, and deeply human, and Costner's performance made audiences fall in love with him. But the moment that defined his image arrived a year later with Field of Dreams. In the film, Costner plays a farmer who builds a baseball field in his cornfield because a mysterious voice tells him to. If you build it, he will come. It's a line that could have sounded ridiculous. Instead, audiences believed every word.
Why?
Because Costner had a unique presence. He didn't play superheroes or unstoppable action stars. He played ordinary men who believed in extraordinary things. And audiences trusted him. Then in 1990, Costner took a massive risk. He directed and starred in Dances with Wolves. Hollywood executives thought it would fail. The film was long. It focused on Native American culture. Large portions were spoken in the Lakota language. Everything about it seemed commercially risky. But Costner believed in the story. And he bet everything on it. The result? 7 wins at the Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. At just 35 years old, Kevin Costner had become one of the most powerful figures in Hollywood. Soon after came The Bodyguard with Whitney Houston. The film became a global phenomenon. The soundtrack became one of the best-selling albums in history. Costner was now one of the biggest stars on the planet. So here's the question. What does a person do when they reach the absolute top? Play it safe. Or keep building, larger, bolder, stranger? The cost of building. For Costner, playing it safe was never the answer. He doubled down. He backed ambitious projects, even when the bets were enormous and the margin for error thin. That same stubbornness that had driven a lonely kid to study people now pushed him to chase authenticity. He wanted films that felt lived in, that smelled like dust and sweat and real cornfields. But ambition carries risk. Some of his choices landed with a thud. When a project fails, especially one you financed, shaped, or directed yourself, the loss is not only financial. It is reputational. It questions judgment. It reverberates through friend circles, executive suites, and studio lots. Which raises a sharper question. When the world says your work is a mistake, do you accept the verdict, or do you keep building anyway? The public watched as Costner's star dimmed in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Films that had been conceived as passion projects became cautionary tales. Yet even amid failure, you could see the same qualities. An earnest belief in storytelling, a refusal to pander, and a determination to make something real. Reinvention and resilience. Every fall in Costner's career has been followed by a reinvention. He found ways to reconnect to audiences, sometimes through smaller roles, sometimes through unexpected genres, sometimes by returning to the director's chair with a renewed eye for craft. What does resilience look like after fame dissolves into headlines about lost money and personal upheaval? For him, resilience looked like showing up to work, again and again. It looked like listening to the voices that still believed in him and ignoring the ones that wanted him gone. It looked like learning, sometimes painfully, and carrying those lessons into the next project. A later chapter in his career would shift the frame once more. At an age when most actors step back, he found himself at the center of the country's most watched television drama, an arc many would not have predicted for a man whose experimental streak once exasperated studios. How does someone rebuild an image shaped by both triumph and humiliation? By trusting that the audience remembers what first drew them in, authenticity. By choosing roles that lean on lived truths rather than hollow spectacle. And by letting the work speak louder than the gossip pages. So where does that leave the man who has built, lost, and built again? It leaves him complicated. It leaves him human. And it leaves a legacy that refuses to be simplified into a single headline. Because the real story here isn't simply rise, fall, return. It's about what you're willing to risk for the stories you think matter. Is that recklessness or courage? Who gets to decide? As you turn off the lights after a long night of watching movies, you might still have one final question. When the chips are down and everything you built is at risk, do you protect what's left, or do you build something new from the ashes? For Kevin Costner, the answer has always been obvious. And for the rest of us, it's a question worth asking, about the stories we chase, the risks we take, and the stubborn hope that no matter how many times the world says no, we can still say yes. By the early 1990s, Kevin Costner was no longer just a successful actor. He was one of the most powerful figures in Hollywood. His films had dominated the box office. His performances were praised. His directing debut with Dances with Wolves had earned him Academy Awards and cemented his reputation as a filmmaker with vision. But success can create its own pressure. How do you follow a triumph that big? Do you play it safe, or do you try to build something even larger? Costner had never been the type to play it safe. So when he committed to producing and starring in an ambitious science fiction epic, he didn't just want another movie. He wanted an event. The film was called Waterworld. Its premise was bold and unusual for the time. The story imagined a distant future where the polar ice caps had completely melted, submerging the entire planet beneath endless ocean. Cities were gone. Nations had vanished. Humanity survived on floating settlements scattered across a vast, unpredictable sea. At the center of the story was a mysterious drifter known simply as the Mariner, a reluctant hero navigating a brutal world where fresh water, land, and hope were all incredibly rare. It was a concept that felt both imaginative and unsettling. What would humanity become if the ground beneath our feet disappeared? How would civilization survive when the horizon never ended? To bring this vision to life, the filmmakers decided to shoot large portions of the movie directly in the open ocean near Hawaii. Massive floating sets were constructed, huge metal structures designed to simulate entire sea-based communities. It was one of the most technically complex productions ever attempted. But nature doesn't negotiate with movie schedules. Storms battered the sets. Equipment was lost in the water. Entire structures had to be rebuilt. Filming delays piled up week after week. And with every delay, the budget climbed higher. First $100 million. Then $150 million. Eventually nearly $175 million, making it the most expensive film ever produced at the time. Hollywood noticed. The media noticed even more. Late-night comedians turned the production into a punchline. Industry analysts predicted catastrophe before the movie was even finished. How could any film possibly earn back that kind of money? Had Costner's ambition finally crossed the line into recklessness? When Waterworld finally premiered in 1995, critics were lukewarm. Some admired its scale. Others mocked its excess. Although the film eventually made respectable money worldwide, the damage had already been done. The story surrounding the film, the narrative created by headlines and jokes, was louder than the movie itself. Hollywood labeled it a failure. And suddenly, the man who had once been considered the industry's golden star was the subject of ridicule. But the professional fallout was only part of the storm. Because while Costner was battling critics and headlines, his personal life was quietly unraveling. The personal cost of fame. Long before the awards, the fame, and the massive productions, Costner had built his life with someone who believed in him when none of that existed. His wife, Cindy Silva. They met when they were young, long before Hollywood knew his name. She supported him through the uncertain early years of his career, years when success was far from guaranteed. But fame changes the rhythm of life. Film productions demand months away from home. Creative obsessions consume time and energy. And the same relentless drive that pushes someone to succeed can slowly push other parts of life to the margins. Have you ever chased a dream so intensely that you didn't realize what it was costing until much later? Costner later admitted that the dedication that fueled his career also created distance in his marriage. The long shoots. The constant pressure. The endless focus on work. All of it added strain. In 1994, after 16 years together, Cindy Silva filed for divorce. The settlement reportedly reached around $80 million, one of the largest divorce settlements in Hollywood history at the time. Imagine experiencing that kind of personal loss while the entire industry is also questioning your professional judgment. Costner was facing both at once. His reputation had taken a hit. His marriage had ended. And yet he did not step away from filmmaking. Instead, he doubled down. But the next risk would deepen the crisis. When Hollywood turns cold. In 1997, Costner directed and starred in another ambitious project. Another large-scale story. Another post-apocalyptic world. The film was The Postman. Set in a fractured America after societal collapse, the story followed a wandering drifter who unintentionally inspires hope by delivering mail between scattered communities. The message was about rebuilding civilization through connection. It was hopeful, earnest, perhaps even idealistic. But critics were merciless. Reviews were brutal. The film struggled at the box office and lost millions. It even earned multiple nominations at the Golden Raspberry Awards, Hollywood's infamous celebration of cinematic failures. Within just a few years, the public narrative around Costner had changed dramatically. Once he had been seen as unstoppable. Now people asked a different question. Had Hollywood already moved on? Because in the film industry, careers rarely end with a dramatic announcement. Instead, something quieter happens. Fewer scripts arrive. Fewer calls come in. Opportunities slowly disappear. And sometimes the silence says more than any headline. The long road back. Through the early 2000s, Costner kept working. He never stopped. Films like Open Range, The Upside of Anger, and Mr. Brooks reminded audiences that his talent had not disappeared. If anything, something interesting had happened. The performances felt deeper, more reflective, more grounded. Some critics even suggested he had become a better actor with age. But Hollywood's spotlight had shifted to younger stars and new trends. So Costner explored other parts of life. He pursued music, touring with his band Kevin Costner and Modern West. He spent more time with his children. He focused on living rather than chasing headlines. In 2004, he married handbag designer Christine Baumgartner. Together they built a quieter life and raised 3 children. For nearly 2 decades their relationship appeared stable and private, far removed from the chaos that had once surrounded him. From the outside, it seemed as if Costner had found balance. The fame had softened. The pressure had eased. And perhaps his most dramatic Hollywood chapters were behind him. Or so it seemed. Because sometimes the most unexpected opportunities arrive when you least expect them. The comeback nobody predicted. In 2018, writer and director Taylor Sheridan approached Costner with a television idea. A modern Western drama. A story about land, power, and family conflict in Montana. The show was called Yellowstone. Costner would play John Dutton, the tough and morally complex patriarch of a powerful ranching family fighting to protect their land from developers, politicians, and rival interests. The character wasn't simple. He was stubborn, protective, sometimes ruthless, but also deeply human. And audiences responded immediately. At first, the show grew slowly. Then something remarkable happened. Viewership exploded, particularly among audiences outside major cities, people who rarely felt represented in modern television dramas. By its 3rd season, Yellowstone had become the most watched show on cable television. More than 10 million viewers per episode. And suddenly, at 65 years old, Kevin Costner was once again one of the biggest stars in entertainment. Hollywood was stunned. The man many had written off was leading the most popular show on television. It raised an interesting question. How many careers actually end? And how many simply wait for the right moment to rise again? But behind the scenes, another conflict was already developing. Because Costner had never stopped dreaming about one particular project. A story he had wanted to tell for decades. The second collapse. While starring in Yellowstone, Costner was secretly working on a passion project called Horizon, an American saga, Chapter 1. The film was envisioned as a sweeping multi-chapter Western epic about the expansion of the American frontier. Settlers, conflict, survival, and the complicated birth of a nation. Costner planned to direct it, produce it, and star in it. But perhaps most surprising of all, he invested a huge amount of his own money. Reports estimated he personally committed around $38 million to the project. Why would someone take that kind of risk after everything he had already experienced? Was it stubbornness, passion, or simply belief? Balancing the demanding schedule of Yellowstone with the massive production requirements of Horizon quickly became difficult. Tensions grew. Negotiations over filming schedules became complicated. Eventually, the situation collapsed. In 2023, it was announced that Costner would not return for the final part of Yellowstone's 5th season. Fans were shocked. And then, just 1 month later, another headline appeared. Christine Baumgartner filed for divorce after 18 years of marriage. Within a single year, Costner lost 3 major pillars of stability. His most successful television role. His marriage. Tens of millions invested in his personal film project. Once again the media began telling a familiar story. Another downfall. Another reckless gamble. Another Hollywood cautionary tale. But Costner's response was surprisingly simple. He kept building. Still betting on the story. In June 2024, Horizon, an American saga, Chapter 1 finally premiered. The film was deliberate, patient, sweeping in scope. Instead of rushing through action, it focused on atmosphere, landscape, and human struggle. Critics acknowledged its ambition and sincerity. But modern audiences, accustomed to faster storytelling, were divided. Some admired its scale. Others found its pace challenging. The box office results were uncertain. The second chapter was delayed. And once again Costner stood in front of reporters defending a project many people did not fully understand. During one interview, he said something that perfectly captured his entire career. "I believe in this story, and I will finish it." Think about that for a moment. After decades of success, failure, criticism, comebacks, divorces, financial risks, he was still betting on the same thing. The story. The man behind the legend. Today, Kevin Costner no longer seems interested in chasing Hollywood's approval. He spends time with his children, works on the projects that matter to him, and continues telling the stories he believes deserve to exist. His career has traveled through extraordinary highs and painful lows. From Academy Award triumphs, to public ridicule, to unexpected reinvention. Yet through every chapter, one characteristic remained constant. He never stopped building. So perhaps the real question isn't whether Kevin Costner was reckless. Maybe the deeper question is this. How many people are willing to believe in their vision when the world calls it madness? How many people would keep investing in their dreams after being publicly wrong more than once? How many would risk reputation, money, and comfort just to finish a story they believe matters? Costner has certainly been wrong about timing before. But one thing is undeniable. Every time he believed in a story, he built it anyway. And sometimes, just sometimes, the world eventually shows up.